guest webinar hosted by the Cloud Standards Customer Council. My name is Tracy Berardi, and I am Program Manager of the CSCC. I'm just sharing my screen here so you can see the presentation. We're very excited because today we're joined by the CEO of Cloud Foundry, Mr. Sam Ramji, and CTO of Open Cloud at IBM, Chris Ferris, who will bring us up to speed on the work of the Cloud Foundry Foundation and its open source platform as a service offering. Sam and Chris will share their perspective on the progress that's been made in the last 6 months since the Foundation's launch. And they'll also highlight the technical direction of Cloud Foundry, including the technical focus areas for the next 3 to 6 months. If you'd like to download the presentation file, we've added a link in the chat box of the GoToWebinar toolbar. So if you open up that chat box, just click right on that link and you can download the PDF if you would like. And also, following the webinar, we will post this presentation and a recording of the webinar to the CSCC website. If you'd like to ask questions, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. You can enter your question into the questions box in the toolbar. And with that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And we'll go to the opening slide. Thanks to all of you for dialing in and being present on the webinar today. We started the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and Chris Ferris, who's also on the call, is the vice chair of the board of directors. We started this foundation on January 21st of this year, 2015. But Cloud Foundry as a project, as a community, and as a movement has been around for several years, which is critical for production hardening. But we'll get to all of that a little bit later. I want to start with the inspiration for Cloud Foundry. Why does it exist? So on slide 3. Those of us who are awake and paying attention, probably all of us on the call, notice that people have changed how they consume and use information. It used to be that we'd do situated computing. We'd go to our desktop to go and be online, and now we're online wherever we are. Right? So as a result, information and commerce must be ubiquitously available. Companies that we've seen in media and retail have gone out of business in the last 5 to 6 years, so the stakes are high. When companies can't make those things available, the business stops. To add to that, the volume and variety of devices in use are exploding. We have supercomputers in our pockets. We have wind turbines that we can push code to. So the industrial internet is meeting the consumer internet in new and surprising ways, which is leading to increasing the rate of change in what people want. And as those desires shift, they shift very rapidly because the cost to build a new application or a new device has gone down so far, and everybody's pretty much playing this game. So there's a new innovation every week. What we've started to see is that the old school thinking of competitive advantage has come to an end, and now we're starting to see that speed of innovation is the new competitive advantage, the ability to continue to sense and respond to what the market wants, week by week, month by month. So if we go to the next slide, slide 4, what's Cloud Foundry? So Cloud Foundry is an open standard for cloud applications. It's unusual because it is open source, it is multi-cloud, and it's multi-vendor. So we have 45 members in the Cloud Foundry Foundation, all of whom are working together to bring Cloud Foundry implementations and applications and services to every country on the planet. I mentioned that it's been around for some time. It is a hardened production infrastructure for global enterprises. I've been in cloud computing for some years. I've been in distributed systems computing for 20 years. One thing that I have learned, and Chris, you can probably echo this experience, is nothing is ever right when written first for distributed computing. It only gets better like wine through age, wouldn't you say?
I would totally agree with that, and I've got even more time in than you have, so absolutely.
We learn through mistakes, and then we patch the mistakes, and over time we end up with a great platform. So the other key component about Cloud Foundry, because we are situated in 2015, is it's designed to make DevOps the normal state of computing. In order to get away from a model of developers built it and then they threw it over the wall to ops who now have to manage it, often without a lot of understanding of the code or the ability to go back to development and fix it when it falls down in production. DevOps is this idea that you've got this harmonious, constant flow of code from writing to integration to deployment and one common team of developers and operations staff making sure that you're able to scale your applications up and down as they need to. Fundamentally, it's built for fast cycle innovation of cloud applications. So Chris, any comments here before we transition?
Yeah, and I think, again, getting back to this notion of sort of DevOps becoming sort of the normal state, what it really means, though, is that, the way that we go about the process of developing itself needs to change. And Cloud Foundry actually makes this transition a bit easier. But again, it doesn't sort of obviate the need for there to be a certain amount of cultural transformation within your enterprise to take advantage of the capabilities that are offered by the platform itself in helping you to transform, right? So technology is never the complete answer, right? It requires a certain amount of cultural change internally, but the tooling again helps to make that possible.
Very true. So on slide 5, we look at what are the benefits of Cloud Foundry. One of the things we find is that for a platform to really support cultural change, and it has to support the needs of a number of different constituencies. And there's a new phrase starting to come out, it is DevOps, because we do see each of these core groups in a corporation needing the same things. So there's often complaints that they're not getting the market fast enough. So we found that the lines of business using Cloud Foundry are getting better speed to market. As a result, a higher rate of user adoption because of that fast cycle innovation. They can get user feedback, they can implement it the next day, they can push it to production, and they can see those improvements in performance, better data gathered, and a better word of mouth by their users. For development, this notion of microservices is sort of invaded everyone's conscience. But there's more to it than simply writing a microservice of a few hundred lines of code to call other microservices. It's about scalable microservices. Can you scale it up? Can you scale it down? Does that happen with the lights out? And continuous deployment. It's one thing to have the ability to write code, another to do continuous integration so that you know that your code base is always in a stable state, but to have continuous deployment so that as soon as you've written the code, can you push it to production within the next hour to enable this fast cycle innovation. That's what the platform does for development. And then finally for operations, continuing on this concept of faster cycle time, when you can see the code, when you can see where it's running, when you can see the state of the containers, when you can see what each cluster of servers is doing, and when you can see them self-healing, because it's constantly pushing the system back towards the desired stable state, you end up with higher reliability as well. So one set of assets to allow developers and operations staff to speak the same language and keep everything running. And for those of us who work on Cloud Foundry, those of us who are in Foundation staff, those of us on the board, I think all of us jump out of bed in the morning thinking about this. It's open source. The key is no vendor lock-in. And in fact, that was probably my single favorite piece of press coverage we got this year, which was out of the mouths of JP Morgan Chase and Bank of New York Mellon, two of the largest banks on the planet, reporting to the Wall Street Journal they chose Cloud Foundry because it prevents vendor lock-in. Chris, any comments?
No, I just wanted to sort of add, I think, I go and I visit a lot of customers, and we talk about this, and again, this is something that transcends just the IT department, and in fact, oftentimes, and again, for those of you who are the IT department, please don't be offended, but the IT department doesn't necessarily get it right away. They're accustomed to looking for tools that help them to deliver, WebSphere, JBoss, DB2, Oracle, whatever it is, a little bit faster, so they can be much more responsive to the development teams that are looking for new servers and new, new web app platforms and so forth to be deployed for them. The unique thing about Cloud Foundry is that what happens is that the platform itself is delivered as a service, and so it becomes a completely different equation between IT and development. So I think it's actually important that this is something that is looked at across the business and not just from a single lens of IT or the business or development.
That's a great point. Tactically, platforms almost never make sense, right? Because you're suffering from the five people in the elephant. because you're just trying to solve for your local situation, which is very practical. However, this is a strategic shift. You can't do systemic optimization without staying back and looking at the whole system, and that's what this is meant to enable. You're totally right.
Yep.
Shifting to slide 6, to put another way, we're seeing that, and we've just done a range of market studies, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but we're finding the verbatims from users of Cloud Foundry that they're adopting Cloud Foundry because fast is now a necessity, not a nice to have, and Cloud Foundry makes faster easy. One of the organizations that is now standardized on Cloud Foundry is the U.S. government's Division 18F, which is responsible for new cloud applications across the government. Their ability to get new things out fast, keep them up in production, and get positive feedback, which I think is probably a first for government computing, no joke, has made a big difference for them. So we're not talking about just for-profit companies, but on the for-profit side, we are seeing not just reduced costs, which is common for infrastructure as a service. So if you look at OpenStack or VMware or SoftLayer, often they'll adopt those lower-level infrastructure technologies because it takes cost out of your business. But we're coming from a different side of the world where we're not looking at cutting costs to drive growth, because you can't cut for growth, but expanding revenue by improving this innovation cycle time, getting new apps, getting new experiences available to users, whether those are corporate users, consumers, or other types of customers. Chris, before we transition to vision and mission, any comments?
No, I think you put it very well.
Thank you. So slide 7, vision and mission, we'll transition to slide 8. The Cloud Foundry Foundation vision, right? What brings it together as a diverse group of developers, operators, systems integrators, large software vendors, banks, telecommunications companies, healthcare companies, is we see a world of cloud computing that is ubiquitous and flexible. The idea that we're not even smart enough necessarily to know where we're going to want to do our computing 5 years from now. Right? So how can we have something that allows us to do public, private, and hybrid deployment today? And then this idea of portability and interoperability. We may pick the cloud today, but we might want to migrate tomorrow or 3 years from now. Or we may want to split our loads. Portability is absolutely crucial in this environment, especially with some of the changes we're seeing globally in standards for user data privacy and security. Citizens of the UK, for example, data can't be moved outside of the UK, but you want to be a global corporation, you need to run a copy of your application. How do you do that? We feel that Cloud Foundry needs to continue to support portability so that you can move the applications where they need to go. And then finally, a cloud computing world that is vibrant and growing. If we can establish this ubiquity of an open source project, much like Linux, but that unlike Linux is truly portable and interoperable, something that was never solved on the desktop standards-based side. We can actually create a massive ecosystem of applications and developers based on an efficient marketplace. ISVs, right, third-party packaged applications running on Cloud Foundry, able to deploy easily into a data center, scaling up and scaling down, deploying into a cloud. The core vision, right? So ubiquity and flexibility, portability and interoperability, and then a vibrant and growing ecosystem so that you can choose what you want and share these innovations with each other.
Yeah, if I could just add to this, Sam, I think, again, the portability and interoperability is really key here. It's really what this is all about. We've actually gone and engineered the governance model around Cloud Foundry, both from a sort of a non-technical as well as a technical perspective, to sort of to derive that as the end result, right? So we're encouraging, you know, from a membership perspective and from a contribution perspective, that the influence you get is how you help to build out the core, right? And this helps ensure that things are portable and interoperable because we're bringing contributions back upstream into the project itself. But also importantly is that we're focusing from the very beginning, which is something that other projects often tend to sort of leave for a year or two and then figure out, oh, well, we need to do this. And we're focusing on defining essentially what it means to be Cloud Foundry from a branding perspective and defining tests and so forth for that conformance and certification of that, so that we drive implementations delivered by multiple vendors that will ensure users get the portability and interoperability that we're actually trying to achieve.
Exactly right. So through certification, one of the first things that we've taken on for 2015, every time you see the Cloud Foundry logo on a cloud service, you will know that it's the same Cloud Foundry, runs the same set of bits, and something that runs on another Cloud Foundry will run there as well. So that's core to the technology and core to the governance, as Chris said, which I think is it's our ability to learn from so many projects that have gone before us, and learning from their mistakes as well as their successes.
Yep.
Let's transition to slide 9 on the Cloud Foundry Foundation mission. We seek to make Cloud Foundry the leading application platform for cloud computing worldwide. And we want to do that so that we can have this virtuous cycle where the platform continues to get better, where it's owned equally by everyone. We continue to deliver on this idea of innovation while avoiding lock-in. The foundation exists to drive the global awareness and adoption of Cloud Foundry as an open source project. If you're not aware of it, you'll certainly never adopt it. So that's something that we do as a not-for-profit. To grow vibrant community contributors, this is where we have a system called Dojo, which we'll talk about a little bit more, so that people can understand how to build on the core. We don't want to be a project that expands very, very rapidly in multiple directions. We are funneling the vast majority of contributions back into the core, back into networking, back into the Elastic runtime, back into the service broker, back into the router. We want to continue to make that better before the project metastasizes into becoming all things for all people, so that vibrant community contributors, while remaining true to the vision of portability, is one of the core things that the foundation does every day. And then third, to create coherence of strategy and action across all of our member companies for the sake of the project and its users. We have, our member companies represent over $1 trillion in market cap. Their sales, marketing, evangelism, technical development, enablement teams are absolutely massive. As a foundation, we are very small. We need to operate by leverage. So the idea is to provide this strategic guidance so that people want to act together for the sake of all of our users. So that's the core of the foundation. Chris, any comments?
No, I think you said it well. I think, you know, just if I might just sort of again focus in on what we're about here is to essentially drive things back to the core. Projects like OpenStack have been wildly successful, but they've also, you know, received sort of dings because they're growing exponentially on the fringes, which, you know, it's great for innovation. It creates a little bit of a problem from delivering the portability, the promise of portability and interoperability that the customers really need and are looking for. So we're very mindful of that, and so we're trying to do this in a deliberate fashion, as opposed to, as Sam said, sort of letting it metastasize into something, you know, beyond our control.
Thank you, Chris. And so within that, you know, we look at the role of the foundation as being this one central entity where we can bring back information about the economic and technical activity about the whole community, reflect the community to itself, to be fair, to be energetic and optimistic as we govern, and then to continue to focus out a few years on growing this massive ecosystem based on portability of applications and skills. So slide 10, I had the opportunity to work for Bill Gates for a few years in the 2000s, along with many other people at Microsoft, of course. One of the things that he used to tell us is, save me from the tyranny of the core. One thing that we've seen a lot of cloud computing for the last several years is this war of Linux versus Windows, public versus private clouds, OpenStack versus VMware or other infrastructures, Java 2 Enterprise Edition versus .NET, build packs, pioneered by Heroku, implemented by Cloud Foundry versus containers, Garden versus Docker. And this doesn't make a lot of sense if we start looking at infrastructure that needs to support cloud applications for the next 20, 30 years. If you go to slide 11, right, we try to deliver the power of and. Today, Cloud Foundry supports Linux and Windows. We have contributions from HP, from Microsoft, from CenturyLink that allow us to support Windows just as well as we support Linux.
And IBM.
Private clouds. And IBM, I'm sorry, of course. I was actually going to talk to IBM on the public side. IBM operates the largest public instance of Cloud Foundry in the world on Bluemix. Chris, 370,000 developers on Bluemix Cloud Foundry now?
I think it's larger than that, but yes, it's pretty significant. Yeah.
I know it's growing by 8,000 to 10,000 developers a week, which is extraordinary. And then tremendous number of private deployments of Cloud Foundry. We run on top of OpenStack. We also run on top of VMware, as well as DigitalOcean, as well as Amazon Web Services. J2E and .NET equally supported, along with Go, Ruby, JavaScript, built PaaS, as well as containers, full support for Docker, as well as for Rocket, which I kind of get to here in sort of the world of Garden, which is a built-in, long-standing Cloud Foundry container. But one of the things that we believe is, again, there's a lot of innovation left in containers. It doesn't make sense to constrain people down to one. So we've got a framework that allows different containers to be plugged in over time.
Yeah, if I could just sort of comment on this. Remember, I'm just sort of wrapping up my time in San Francisco here at the DockerCon conference that we had. And one of the major announcements that came out of that is this new organization under the Linux Foundation called the Open Compute Project that's focused on essentially enabling this broad collection of alternative container orchestration engines, if you will, to use the same technology underneath. And this is a lot of what we've been about with Warden and Garden inside Cloud Foundry. We've been using containers since the very beginning, and so Docker is not new in the use of containers. It's been around for quite a while. But the important thing, though, is that under Open Compute, we can all collaborate on defining the single vision of what it is to be a container image and a container runtime that can operate that container regardless of how it was created.
That's a really good point. So you can find out more about Open Container Project by going to opencontainer.org. Like Cloud Foundry, it is a project of the Linux Foundation. So Cloud Foundry Foundation, as a 501c6, sits underneath the Linux Foundation's aegis, which is important because we're able to borrow a lot of the best practices, but also work together for towards a common outcome, rather than being sort of bucketed as competitive in this way or competitive in that way. We were able to work directly with the Docker leaders, Docker community, and create the Open Container Project. It standardizes both the Docker file format, or the container file format, the Docker file, as well as harmonizing that with something called AppC, or App Container Spec, a competing standard for the file system and file format for the container. And it also standardizes the runtime, so libcontainer and Rocket being brought together in a single common runtime standard that we'll be able to work on together as a community. Any of you on the call can search your organizations behind it. I think we've had 20 or more companies that launch. Containers are at least as important as virtualization for the next decade of computing. Being able to get your hand in and getting aware and participating is important. All right, slide 12, we sort of take a quick look at the 2015 goals. Again, driving awareness and adoption of Cloud Foundry as a platform, growing contribution to Cloud Foundry's support ecosystem, and building a commercial ecosystem for Cloud Foundry. And this is tremendously important. We measure our success based on the commercial success of our member companies. If we see sustainability, which is what we see commercial success as, then we know Cloud Foundry is delivering value and it will be around for a long time. So this work on the ecosystem, work on certification is absolutely crucial. And then also working with related ecosystems like Docker and OpenStack. So Chris, any comments here before we transition? I want to briefly touch on our organization structure and then get into our membership and what we're doing.
No, I think, but these goals, again, they definitely reinforce the vision that we had in the previous chart. So.
Great. So slide 13, it's a small organization, as you can see, about 8 of us. We are a core team of experienced, fully dedicated long-term professionals. We're paid by Cloud Foundry Foundation revenue. That revenue comes in from members primarily, as well as from event sponsorships. Everybody in the team has 15 to 25 years experience in technology, and is bringing that to bear on these particular fields, right? Whether it's tech roadmap, marketing ops, branding and communications, PR and AR ecosystem. Just today, we're announcing that we hired Stormy Peters to lead worldwide technical evangelism. Stormy most recently built the 7,500 strong Mozilla Developer Network at the Mozilla Foundation, and today she is receiving an award at the Women in Open Source Conference in Boston, and is delivering a keynote right now. So there's breaking news for those of you who dialed in.
Yeah, this is a great hire for you, Sam. I'm totally supportive of this.
It's tremendously exciting. To slide 14, again, we sit inside the Linux Foundation, so we have this tremendous extended organization of people with a lot of experience. This is not a complete list of the Linux Foundation employees. I think the LF is up to about 90 or so employees now, led by their CEO, Jim Zemlin, and then a range of different staff members. That's part of why we can run the Cloud Foundry Foundation so lean. We don't need to hire anybody to run IT or finance or HR, and we can lean on the marketing, events, PR organization, and including legal counsel from the Linux Foundation. So it's nice. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and we're able to use so much of the experience that they've built over the last decade.
And I think the other important aspect of this is a lot of these foundations they spin up and they're sort of starting from scratch, and they're learning their way, and they make a couple of mistakes here and there. And so, in the context of being, a Linux Foundation project, we get to benefit from all of that past mistake making, and we're actually, I think, executing at a much more accelerated level than other new foundations.
It's been tremendously helpful for us. I think it's part of why we make rapid progress. So going to slide 15, right? Who we are together. This is the most important part. So thanks for putting your heads into the context and following along as we explain why we're doing all this. But who are we is the most important thing. On slide 16, you'll see a partial list of our membership. We've got about 45 members. We're adding about a member a week. You can see our founding member platinum tier and our gold tier. Also, most recently joined the gold tier is Huawei. So what we're starting to see, if you look at this, is you can't break down a single industry. You can't look at a single horizontal slice of technology and say, oh, it's all about this. We're seeing that cloud applications matter very crucially to every industry, and being able to stand those up on a range of infrastructures is why we're getting a lot of draw from users, as well as from systems integrators and other vendors of cloud software. Chris, any comments on the membership?
Yeah, I'd really like to highlight this point on the fact that we have some end user companies, not your typical let's join the foundation as a core, sponsor at the gold or platinum level, whether it's BNY Mellon or Accenture, these are not the typical companies that necessarily are engaging themselves in these communities as sort of, founding sponsors. And so we have to understand sort of what's happening that's causing this. And again, I think it's the fact that what Cloud Foundry does that other cloud-based offerings do not is it essentially empowers what you would normally consider as consumers of technology to actually deliver capability into the market themselves. And I think that's really transformative.
Well, they've made us a lot smarter, right? So if you just take one slice, for example, through Accenture and GE, and how that's led us to do a lot more work on Internet of Things and industrial Internet workloads, making sure that those particular workload characteristics are strongly supported in the system. You can take another slice of users who have educated us, like CenturyLink and Swisscom, who are using this technology internally to run telecommunications application workloads. That puts different pressure on the platform and stuff that we wouldn't have simply thought of by ourselves. I think we'll continue to see more of that, especially as BNY Mellon, JPMC, Bloomberg, Allstate, others become much more continue to act and become more active as contributors to the code base as well as driving our requirements.
Yeah.
So to summarize our point of view on slide 17, we can't do it alone, and neither can you. All of us are so much smarter and more powerful than any of us. So this idea of building a virtuous cycle of the Cloud Foundry ecosystem absolutely depends on your engagement and on public awareness. So this continued growth and development of our ecosystem, that's core to our ability to continue to promote it. It's a flywheel, if you can imagine. On the flip side, what we've heard back from our members and from companies that are in the process of joining the foundation is that they want to have a voice in the project. Everyone understands that it makes no sense to do anything that's not open source these days. But all open source is not created equal, right? How do you make sure that you're active in the project? How do you prevent vendor lock-in? How do you make sure your voice is heard on business matters? How do you influence the project roadmap? Can we make this as transparent as possible and put you in control of where it goes? That's what we're able to do as a foundation, as a separate legal entity, funded by memberships and active in project development every day. So we'll transition to slide 18, the Cloud Foundry community. This is one of the most extraordinary things that we found in the last, or that I've found in the last several months, is that it's a really neat community. It's a very pragmatic community that is focused on exchanging practical experience rather than sort of theoretical arguments about the best possible, algorithm or approach to a particular, particular idea someone has based on theory. Very pragmatic. Let's do the test. Once we've done the performance test of the router, then we understand the performance characteristics. Now we can do another experiment. We can try something different. We can say, hey, here's some code that we wrote that tests in the following way. It's got these performance characteristics. Do you want to use this instead? Personally, I really like that. I'm a radical pragmatist. Second, tremendously diverse community. One of the things that I believe strongly, and I think each of us in the foundation believes, it is a power of diversity that produces better software. When we can reflect more people's needs, more companies' needs, more situations, better thinking, we produce better software. It is very practical. It is not a nice to have, it is a must have. So our community is diverse. It's inclusive of people across race, gender, orientation, and lifestyle. It's a safe place to collaborate. And finally, it's respectful. One of the things that I like about the community a great deal is that it's a community of listeners. We find that we have something to learn from the quietest voice in the room, often has the most profound wisdom to offer us.
Yeah, I think, again, I think it's just the diversity. And, we have not just, people of different races, but also people from different cultures. We've got people involved as what we call dedicated contributors to the projects in Europe, in Asia, in the in the major market in the States and in Canada, and in countries large and small, right? We had two of the engineers from SAP are from Bulgaria, right? And IBM's now got two people from Russia. So it's really just bringing people from across the globe together, collaborating, irrespective of as Sam mentioned, their race, gender, orientation, or lifestyles.
That's a great point, because it's not about a software hegemony, right? It is about a global set of cloud software that anyone can use. So this idea of being able to support each culture's requirements, right, and reflect something that makes sense. We couldn't have made this stuff up, right? We have to have developers in Beijing telling us, what this particular thing means or how it ought to be structured based on how it's going to be adopted in China.
Exactly.
It's one of the glorious things of getting to learn on a global scale. All right, so it's slide 19. The benefits of membership. Why do members join? Apart from all the things we've talked about so far, leveraging billions of dollars in shared R&D effort, right? Getting the confidence to know that you understand the roadmap and have influence over that allows you to take a major dependency on it. IBM's CICS was built in 1966. Now we can look back to the benefit of hindsight and say, software doesn't live for a year, it doesn't live for a decade. When you build production systems, it lives for multiple decades, right? IBM's KICS infrastructure is still running, certainly probably hundreds of billions of dollars worth of transactions just in Wall Street banks. So as this becomes more and more used and more dependable, being able to leverage that is crucial. Quarterly global market research is our ability to go and dig into different corners of the globe and understand what is working, what's not working, sharing that with all of our members. This idea of being able to prioritize a roadmap in PMC, which is related to a point I'll make in a moment about the SIGs. A clear path to contribution through the Dojo program. Chris, I'd love for you to talk about this for a moment, because you, as the CTO of Open Cloud at IBM and as a longtime open sourcer, even back in your Sun days, where you probably, what was the first time that maybe you came across containers back in Solaris?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the Dojo program.
Yeah, so the Dojo program is actually, I think, very, it's something that's unique to Cloud Foundry, and essentially what it does is an accelerated program to bring engineers on board to get them into a position of being what other projects typically call a committer, right? Somebody who can commit directly to the work, to the code base. It's a 6-week program. It involves pairing in a co-located, typically in a co-located type of a context, where you're essentially immersed into the project with others that are what we call dedicated contributors, and you learn very quickly, the code base, the practices that we have from a development perspective, the approach that we take in terms of being very heavily test-driven and behavior-driven in how we approach the actual development of the code base itself. And once you're through that 6-week program, then as long as you're pairing, you can be considered a dedicated contributor as well, and you can go back home wherever you are, whether that's Russia or China or South America or Antarctica for that matter, and continue to contribute on a regular basis. And so this creates, a much more accelerated path to getting people in a position where we can both contribute directly, but also and influence the direction, but also so that we can help others outside of that community of dedicated contributors to contribute quickly, because we have people who are adept at being able to review code that comes in as pull requests from, if you will, from outside that core. Other projects tend to sort of, they organically grow this, and so it can take upwards of a year before somebody who's been working on, let's say, OpenStack or Docker to become an OpenStack core reviewer or a Docker maintainer, simply because basically you have to build up that credibility within the community of other engineers that are working on the project to the point where they respect your contributions and your thought process and your ability to review and critique code fairly, to the point where they're willing to sort of bring you into the inner sanctum. With Cloud Foundry, again, this process is accelerated and only takes 6 weeks. And so we're hoping that we can really leverage this to scale the set of core contributors greatly within the first year.
Thank you, Chris. Membership-wide marketing communications programs might not seem at first like it applies to everyone. It might sound like it applies only to the vendors. But again, to reference the Wall Street Journal article that Bank of New York Mellon and JP Morgan Chase were in, that's meaningful to be able to have this conversation about what's happening in the software. It helps the members position themselves as increasingly innovative. They can talk about the technology underpinnings of their increased cycle, their increased innovation output. Also helps them recruit new engineers, right? As we know, developers are hard to get, and as we move to the cloud, there's a small supply of cloud developers. A great way to attract that inbound interest for future employees is by being able to do joint PR and joint marketing around your technology leadership. Related to that is the special interest groups. So we talked before about how telecommunications, financial services, industrial internet, healthcare have these, each one has these very particular requirements. So we formed special interest groups where users are able to meet and share requirements and influence the roadmap to make sure that Cloud Foundry is a platform for each of these groups and all of these groups. Do a lot of events. Members find a lot of value in connecting with each other. And then finally, we have the strategy council, where we determine what our long-term bets are, how we stand with other projects on interoperability, what are the key areas that we need to do at a gross level on roadmaps, such as PKI. Our user advisory board, where we draw in input only from users and built up a user requirements database that all members can draw on as they continue to add to the code base. And then finally, a Cloud Foundry Marketplace. So as we build our certification program, a place that everybody can come and see what is it that's portable, guaranteed to work, what will leverage your Cloud Foundry investment. So transition to slide 20 on global market research. I'll be brief. Want to make sure we have time for questions. This idea of being able to measure geographies, in 5 languages every quarter and understand what's the rate of adoption of the cloud, what is it that we're doing right, what are we doing wrong, what do we need to adjust. This is our opportunity to provide that feedback and information to all of our members so everyone can adjust themselves appropriately. And we found it necessary to sample, to ask questions of line of business leaders as much as it is IT managers, developers, and operations leadership. Slide 21, on our project management committees and council, this is how the roadmap actually works. And Chris, I'll ask you to speak to this slide. We organize ourselves a bit in the model of Apache. We want to be able to add new projects as necessary without growing too fast. At the same time, we want to have a transparent and consistent roadmap across everybody who's contributing to the code. So Chris, you've had experience in setting this up, and of course I'm on the PMC Council as well.
Right. So the PMC is, again, as Sam mentioned, it's modeled a little bit after Apache, although not quite exactly the same, because typically there's one PMC per project in Apache. So the PMCs in Cloud Foundry are organized around sort of domains of the Cloud Foundry environment itself. And so we have a runtime PMC that's focused on the Elastic runtime, the Diego project routing, things like that, moving the APIs all into the runtime as well. Then there's a services PMC that's focused on developing sort of the core set of community-based, typically open source service brokers. And then we have a utilities PMC that's focused on not just not only sort of the Java or other language-based utility functions. Looking at the Java IDE platform, we have an Eclipse project that is focused on developing an IDE environment that can integrate with Cloud Foundry. And then we also have a command line interface and a number of other tools, including user authentication and so forth. And then we have a Bosch PMC. Now Bosch it's sort of it sits alongside Cloud Foundry. It's not a core part of Cloud Foundry, but it is what enables Cloud Foundry to be provisioned on those multiple cloud platforms that Sam mentioned a little bit earlier, whether it's Amazon, OpenStack, Azure, IBM SoftLayer, or VMware. Bosch is that sort of it's the, if you will, it's the glue that allows us to ride on top of all these different cloud platforms, and without the actual Cloud Foundry runtime having to know or understand anything about what's underneath. And this is critically important. And then finally, oh no, I'm going to blank out on the last one. But anyway, so we have these things that are organized, and as Sam said, we're trying to set up an environment where we can add new projects, and typically they would find themselves within a new PMC. But we also have the ability to grow this so that if we feel that there's a need for some other domain that has not yet been addressed, we could create a new PMC to start addressing that particular domain, and then grow that organically. But again, one of the things we're focused on here is ensuring that we don't create too much of an initial sprawl and run into some problems that some other projects tend to have, where innovation just goes crazy and it becomes really hard to move things along in a coherent and meaningful manner at an agile scale, right? And so again, other open source projects tend, especially the ones that tend to be uber successful, tend to have suffer from a period of a couple of years where the innovation and the growth is so expansive that it's really hard to sort of get your arms and legs around the project itself. So we're trying to make sure that we don't run into those same situations that other projects have had. And again, that's based, as Sam mentioned, on the fact that we're building on the shoulders of giants, and the people that helped over the course of the past 18 plus months working on defining the governance model, they've been through this, they've seen this movie before, they've learned their lessons from all the various mistakes that other projects before them have made, and hopefully we're addressing some of those in the governance model we've created here.
Thank you, Chris. So on slide 22, we'll briefly touch on the dojo program again, and then I'll talk to the marketing programs before we wrap up and open to questions. So the dojo program is the fastest path to dedicated committer status, as Chris mentioned. It's very specific on skills development for test-driven development, for learning the code base, for working on a particular subsystem, alongside the project lead or other experienced engineers who've already contributed code to that. So you're not kind of going on best efforts or hope or charismatic influence, but practical training. So you'll be trained alongside dedicated committers so that you understand exactly how the code's structured and everybody has seen you in action. And these are really powerful skills. XP or extreme programming, pairing, agile development based on week-long inputs to stories, and twice monthly releases are pretty crucial. It's also good modern development practices to be able to cross-pollinate into other software development that you do in your corporation. On slide 23, global marketing and communications programs, a lot of what makes the foundation exist and the project exist is the existence of the community. So being able to kick off our relationships with our members, making announcements so that everybody knows this is happening and it's rolling. Our global summits are pretty crucial. These are great opportunities for practitioners, vendors, to be able to get together, new users to be able to share practical experience, and being able to do large-scale global industry events. So we participate in, for example, OSCON is coming up, the open source conference that O'Reilly puts on every year in Portland is coming up in July. Apache conferences, a wide range of open source and cloud conferences are where we maintain activity and where our members support us. And then finally, we try to stay in constant contact. Every 2 weeks we have working group discussions, not strictly not only on marketing, but also as we have brought Stormy Peters on board, technical evangelism. How do we do a meetup in a box? How do we really give the tools to the community users that enables them to educate themselves and to attract new users, new developers to this phenomenon that is Cloud Foundry. So to close, slide 25 or 24, why we are inspired. So if you go to slide 25, we live in an age of open source data centers. This is not something we would have said 10, 15 years ago. But if you look at slide 26, you'll recognize all of these icons, right? So right from the basement, right from the hardware, you've got the Open Compute project. As we look at carrier networking and data center networking, we've got OPNFV and Open Daylight, OpenStack, the Zen project, Linux, Docker, Cloud Foundry, Node.js. This is the shape of the modern data center. It's there because of the economic pressure of every single company of any size needing to get good at software, and for global corporations absolutely having to add software and services competency. That much economic pressure means we have to collaborate. We have to form these software collectives. We have to share. So if you look at all of the projects here, interesting to see the range of it. Almost all of these are now Linux Foundation projects. So Open Compute and OpenStack are not Linux Foundation projects, but the rest are sharing this aegis of good practices, software collectives, intellectual property governance. How can we make these things work really effectively for everyone so we have a better cloud computing environment in the future than we have today? So slide 27, we believe, because we've learned from experience, that working together we can change the world. So that is what we're doing at the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and we invite you to join us, and we're excited to meet you. So with that, we'll go to questions.
Great. Thank you, Sam and Chris. This is Tracy again from the Cloud Council. We really appreciate your time. We do have a couple of questions that came in. The first, what's your view of the technology overlap of open source projects like Cloud Foundry, OpenStack, and Docker, and how will this resolve itself in the future?
So there's relatively little overlap between Cloud Foundry and Docker these days, especially as you look at the Docker project as being libcontainer and the Docker file, which is now part of the Open Container project. Containers are something that have to be managed and deployed within Cloud Foundry. So I think that's been good pressure on Cloud Foundry to improve its capabilities for the data center. There was a time when Cloud Foundry only managed build packs and deployed applications in its in that mode. Now it can also support containers. So I think being open source and competing for adoption has been beneficial to both projects. Relative to OpenStack, it's a bit harder to say. There are aspects of OpenStack that are completely unique, right? The ability to support a wide range of hardware based on API compatibility. But one of the things we're starting to see is that there are requests for Cloud Foundry to be deployed on bare metal. So where you're trying to manage containers, where you're trying to write to a homogeneous set of storage, network, and compute assets, those aren't always environments where you want OpenStack to run. But wherever OpenStack's already been deployed, we find that the Cloud Foundry sits in its spot, right? It basically sits on top of the OpenStack APIs, as Chris said before, via Bosch, and allows you to take advantage of everything that you've invested in OpenStack by running user space applications on top of that. So we try very hard to create harmony between Cloud Foundry, Docker, and OpenStack because so many of our users have adopted that trifecta of technologies together. Chris, any comments?
Yeah, there are aspects, as Sam mentioned, of these other projects that do then sort of overlap in functionality, and I think in some cases they can be complementary, and in others, I think the industry itself is sort of looking for the right answer, and I'm not, I'm in a position to say, I think with some authority, that we haven't really found it, right? We're still exploring and experimenting with what works and what doesn't work. And so things like OpenStack Heat and how that relates to deploying patterns of capability that can be composed into a single sort of a solution or a service, and then comparing and contrasting that with something like Cloud Foundry Bosch or with something like Docker Compose. I think the industry is still sort of, the jury is still out on which of these is going to sort of emerge going forward, and what the right approach is to delivering, from a full developer experience all the way into operations of, the composite components of something that is delivering microservice-based capability. I think a lot of these things are still being explored, and we're trying to understand what the right approach is. The interesting thing is that we're all, I think, as a community of engineers and innovators working collaboratively across these lines in these open, transparent communities. And that's really, I think at the end of the day, what's going to help us all succeed is the ability to operate not in competitive environments between these open source initiatives, but rather in collaborative, in a collaborative manner. And that's happening.
Very well. Yeah, that's well said.
Makes sense.
Tracy, you had another question?
Yes. Does the Cloud Foundry platform integrate big data? Was a question that just came in a few minutes ago.
It's
yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Chris has done this at IBM and Bluemix, so go ahead, Chris.
That's right, exactly, and Pivotal has done it as well. Absolutely. So, one of the functions that we have in Cloud Foundry is the ability to integrate a service and bind that to an application, and we do that typically through some sort of a REST-based, or in other cases it could be like a JVC-based interface, and so the broker itself does the provisioning of the service. It basically calls out to whether it's a Hadoop cluster to spin up a new Hadoop cluster to spin up a new Hadoop cluster, and then give the credentials to the application so that it can interact with that going forward. The Hadoop cluster itself, though, is something that's independent of Cloud Foundry. It can be running beside it. It can be off in a cloud someplace, far, far away, for that matter. And that's one of the beautiful aspects of Cloud Foundry is we are not limited to the domain or the nature of the services with which you can integrate. They can be big data, they can be Internet of Things, they can be typical, traditional data type services. They can be business process management, rules execution, or just your typical SaaS type things. They can deal with mobile, social, big data, analytics. All those things are capable in the context of the Cloud Foundry platform.
One of the really cool things about the architecture is this framework of service brokers. So very practically, service broker is used internally to write to Cloud Foundry's own data stores. It's also used to connect to cloud services like Twilio or IBM Watson, as well as being adaptable to existing legacy services. Maybe you have something on a mainframe that's got a web services gateway in front of it. Maybe you've got a CRM system that you've built in-house. The service broker layer expects that that is what's going to be, that all of those capabilities are going to be needed by the microservices. Remember, a microservice is a little bit of code. Its purpose is not to duplicate things that have already been built, but to call on them and sequence them appropriately. So the service broker layer is crucial, and that is where the big data tie-ins come in most strongly.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for at least one more question. What is the most important challenge for you as a platform developer to build and manage the ecosystem? Is it building the platform, building the community, governing the community, or something else?
All of the above.
I think governing the community is crucial. The project has got so much of a tailwind, right? It's being pushed so hard by adoption already. Our key challenge is to make sure that we grow it in a healthy way. Just on a personal note, my son is going to college next year. My daughter is about to be 16, so I kind of think of it a bit like raising a teenager. As you try to govern what you can, right? You don't want to stymie growth, but you want to end up with a healthy adult over time.
Yeah.
So making sure that members get along well, that the users have plenty of opportunities to speak with each other and collaborate, and make sure that there's a healthy, sustainable commercial set of outcomes that everyone agrees on, right? That our ability to demonstrate success is that people are finding so much value in this that our engineers, operators, et cetera, are able to pay their mortgage, put their kids through school, right? Make their companies actually work. So for me, it's the thoughtful, consistent governance, especially because we're in this world of co-opetition, right? Just looking at the slide where we had our platinum sponsors, some of our members compete with each other. That's got to be the case. So how do we keep governing that towards principled competition? And so far, I think that's gone real well. But we'll continue to be thoughtful, energetic, and optimistic about it.
Great. Thanks, Sam. One last one will sneak in at 11:59 Eastern. Is it the goal of Cloud Foundry to interoperate with other commercial platform as a service offerings from the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google?
In general, Cloud Foundry is a replacement for other platforms as a service. So it interoperates with infrastructure as a service, runs on top of Azure, runs on top of Amazon Web Services. At some point, no doubt, it will run on top of Google Compute Engine. But it's the promise that Cloud Foundry has is portability across clouds. When you look at cloud-based platforms as a service like Google App Engine, when you look at Amazon Elastic Beanstalk or Lambda, when you look at Azure, Fabric services or cloud services, each of those can really only be run in a vertical stack that includes that particular vendor's cloud environment. And what Cloud Foundry is all about is giving you the interoperability and portability to move your app wherever you go. So that exists in opposition to specific proprietary cloud-based PaaSes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. Again, we'll post the presentation and the recording from today. It'll be up on the CSCC website this afternoon. We invite you to visit us. It's cloud-council.org is the CSCC website, and please join us for future events. Thanks again, Sam and Chris, and everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tracy. And thanks.